Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. Today is a unique episode because it's just me, friends. And I look forward to talking about something that is close to my heart, something that I've experienced myself, and something that I have had numerous conversations with other mamas, particularly out there. We're going to be talking about mom guilt today. I'm sure that if you are driving, doing laundry right now, and you are a parent, you're like, girl, I get this. I understand this. This is something that I live in daily. This is something that my friends struggle with if they're parents. And just as a side note, we don't want to exclude the dads out there. You certainly, as any parent, are going to struggle with some level of guilt or shame throughout your parenting experience. But today's conversation isn't excluding you, but it's more, this kind of meets to the needs of mamas because that's kind of the women and my own experience that I come from. So keep in mind, this isn't excluding y'all, but it is speaking to generalities of what it's like to be a parent that struggles with guilt as a parent. So let's dive right in. Again, when I say mom guilt, probably things come to mind, right? You're thinking of your own experiences, things that you worry about, think about, observe in other families, and are curious why you're doing that in your own, or how maybe you've messed up, or you're a failure in some places, there's brokenness there. Yeah. Ladies, we're all in this together, right? We've experienced this at some sort of season. That's just a reality of parenting. But I'm curious, as a practitioner, as a friend and sister to so many others, where does this come from? I figure once we figure out where the root is behind some of this mom guilt, then we'll be able to overcome it and take steps towards health and wellness. And so that's what we're going to be digging into today. We're going to be talking about how can we overcome mom guilt. So let's talk about, where does it come from? I believe that there is a couple places. I believe that it comes from comparison. I believe that it comes from expectations and mental health struggles. Yeah. So for me personally, again, I think y'all know that I am a mama of 4, and my kids are now older. Majority are in high school and middle school, and then I do have an elementary age kiddo. So when they were younger, there was pretty much chaos in my house. And I was one of the first that had kids in my friend group. And so I felt like I was kind of navigating this on my own. My friends were just then getting married. They hadn't had kids yet. I was lucky enough to have neighbors or maybe even a church community where I could rely on some of the experiences of mamas that have had kids before. But there was this essence of just constantly being overwhelmed. There was intrusive thoughts of, am I doing a good enough job? And frankly, always coming up feeling like I wasn't. And again, I wasn't exactly sure at that moment in time where that came from. Now, as I can look back and I have my own clinical experience, I can say, man, these came from several different factors. So again, let's start into the comparison factor. We know that comparison is found when we assess our similarities or differences between us and the people around us. It's how we evaluate our success or where we fit in. And the worst of all, especially now with social media, because social media didn't come out until, I at least had 2 kids at that point. And so I hadn't always experienced the life of social media. So my kids were a little bit older, but I know that if I had had the same amount of exposure to Facebook and Instagram that I have now, it probably would have been much worse for me. But we tend to compare our reality with people's highlights. Think about that. When you are scrolling through your feeds and seeing this picture of kids well-dressed or a home that is clean or sharing recipes left and right, and you're thinking, y'all, I don't even know how you do that, because let me tell you about my life. My life doesn't even compare to that. And then in that moment, I am therefore comparing what I am seeing their lifestyle, or what I think their lifestyle is, frankly, to what my reality is. That starts becoming detrimental for me. That becomes condemning to me. That's what comparison does. It creates a gap between what we believe that we are providing for our kids and what everyone else in the world is providing for them. Now, we know that comparison isn't reality, but in those moments, they seem very real and very overwhelming for us. So the next contributor to mom guilt is expectations. These are for ourselves or what we think other people want for ourselves, like the perception that others expect us to do certain things, especially as the role of mom. We know that we come from like a cultural perspective in the United States, but also in other countries as well, is that there is this idea of how do you mom? What does motherhood look like? And then we take on those expectations. We try to live them out in our day-to-day life. But what ends up happening is that we can't fulfill those expectations. And so then we start condemning ourselves, judging ourselves. But there was something I found a couple years ago, something referred to as the invisible load of motherhood. You might be familiar with this. There's tons of things out there now, which is so phenomenal that they can speak into this, that there is expectations that are influenced by this invisible load that many times people are ignorant about. I mean, I certainly was. I couldn't even put to words some of the things that I felt like was pressed on me as my role as a mother until I started reading these things. So let's dig into a little bit about what the invisible load of motherhood looks like. So according to psychedmommy.com, which is a really cool name, by the way, the invisible load of motherhood describes the unnoticed and uncompensated physical, mental, and emotional labor completed behind the scenes to keep our households happy, healthy, and running smoothly. Well, Forbes.com came up with another one. It says, mothers tend to perform a greater share of the hands-on childcare duties than fathers, and also spend more time and energy thinking about their family's needs. These thoughts are called the invisible load of parenting because, unlike picking kids up from school, the mental aspects of parenting often go unnoticed. All right, friends, we can all experience that, right? We know what that feels like. The deep-rooted feelings that we should be doing more because we love our kids so much. That's the thing. All of this is motivated because we love our kids. We want to provide the best for them, and we want them to have things potentially that we never had or to be raised differently than we were raised. And so this adds this element of intensity to parent well. And so when we feel that these expectations are placed on us and this invisible load influences us, it becomes overwhelming. It becomes debilitating. So I wrote down some examples. Maybe you can relate to this. Hopefully this helps you feel seen and heard as a mom that might be experiencing some of these invisible loads that you didn't even realize was on your plate. So it's managing the calendar, schedules, and routines. So you're the go-to when it comes to that. Always being the go-to parent or default parent, anticipating everyone's needs, the one who has to take the time off, right? Like your kiddo's sick or they have a doctor's appointment or there's a school parent-teacher conference, like you're always the one that has to take the time off. It's hard to find a break because you're constantly in need with your kiddos. You are the main parent who can soothe the child. So it's like at night or during the day, there's an issue and they always seem to come to you because you're the one that seems to meet their needs the best in those emotional moments. And then finally feeling you are always on or always needed. Can anyone relate to that? I know that I can, certainly. I joke with my husband that in the way that we have divvied up the responsibilities in our house, and again, some of these are unspoken, they just happen naturally, is that my husband manages the travel soccer, which is quite a lot. Sometimes it's a full-time job with two boys in travel soccer, and they're busy all the time. They have tournaments during the weekend and practices throughout the week. And then I start listing all the things I'm responsible for. Okay, well, I'm responsible for doctor's office, schoolwork, parent-teacher conferences, making sure they're taking their vitamins, medications, they're brushing their teeth, that they're fully clothed. You know, when I start going through all these things, I was like, wait, that seems a little imbalanced. Yes. Here's the issue, and I know that I struggled with this in the beginning of our marriage as well, is that he didn't know that I was feeling this way. Think about that. How often do we communicate that we feel these expectations? Or if you're like me, I just barrel through them. I get it done, and then I honestly can become passive aggressive. Anybody else out there like that? Yeah. I think that oftentimes our partners don't even realize that we are struggling with this load that may not be spoken about, that they don't realize that all these expectations that are placed on us, whether from society or from our own doing, is overwhelming. We have to do a better job of explaining and asking and seeking assistance because our partners want to help. They may not just know how to do so. So without the discussion of expectations, that can become some bitterness or even some relational discord. Finally, what is the last thing that I believe contributes to mom guilt? Mental health struggles. Yeah, this is a big one. This is one that I feel like is known about. The stigma is being decreased, which is phenomenal, but it's still not embraced enough and a part of more and more conversations as it should. So here's a big thing that I need you to hear me say. Our thoughts and feelings can lie to us. You hear that? Our thoughts and feelings can lie to us. Just because we think and feel something doesn't mean it's true. I know that our feelings can be very convincing. I know that our thoughts can be very fluid and they flow, but it doesn't mean that they're accurate, realistic, and certainly not always healthy. So, for me personally, I know that I went through a season and still go through this where I am genetically predisposed to depression and anxiety. So I've had this pre-kids, and then once I actually had my first child, that's when I started developing postpartum depression that then turned into premenstrual dysphoric disorder. I mean, they'll probably throw out a bunch of different names and diagnoses, which is fine because all it's basically saying is that my feelings and thoughts are big and intrusive and can be overwhelming and negative and worrisome sometimes, but that they're valid and that my body and my brain are truly experiencing those things. But it doesn't mean that they are reality, nor do I need to take them on and say they are my identity. That's a big difference between how we live our lives, whether being influenced by our emotions, influenced by our thoughts, or challenging them and saying, is this true? Is this accurate? So I know for me, when I first had my daughter, Haley, 17 years ago, it was a rough point. It was a rough point in my season of marriage, and my husband was working in the restaurant industry. I was getting my grad degree for counseling, and I was raising this little baby, and I didn't know what I was doing. Again, it was the first one in my friend group that was having kiddos. And so I felt really alone and isolated. And then when those thoughts and feelings became intrusive, I started waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks. I felt worthless. I felt like I was ruining my child's life, even though, again, she was an infant and didn't even know anything that was going on. I had fear that someone was going to hurt her or the surroundings, myself was going to hurt her. These thoughts and these feelings were real. They were intense. And I didn't even, as a therapist in training, in grad school, I still didn't fully understand what was going on because these feelings were so real for me. And so what ended up happening, I think I got to a really dark place emotionally, and I just felt like this is not normal. This is not okay, and I can't keep living in this place of darkness. And so I went and I talked to a counselor. There's nothing wrong with going to a counselor. Again, there's stigmas for that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a therapist. P.S. This isn't job security. I am telling you that there is so much value when you go to someone that is unbiased, that can look at your life and tell you, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I understand. I've had other people that have struggled with this, or this isn't uncommon, or even to provide a level of identity to what I was experiencing. At that point, it was postpartum depression and anxiety. And it was intense, friends. That's the thing is then once I had my baby and I started living as a role as the mom and struggling with these thoughts that I didn't feel like I could go to anyone and ask for help. But the moment that I did and I resigned myself to admit that I was struggling, I tell you, it was such a huge release of so many emotions I didn't even know I was holding on to. And in fact, what ended up working for me, is that I did take, I was recommended to go to my doctor and take a medical intervention. And what became really powerful for me is that I realized that my body wasn't making enough feel-good chemicals. And I know that, again, there's some stigma with that about medication. And now I'm in a season where I'm actually doing a combination of things. And again, I have to say this disclaimer, I am not your doctor. I cannot provide you medical advice. I am a licensed therapist. However, I'm not your licensed therapist, so I cannot direct you where you need to go. That's for the lawyers out there. So this, for me personally, I took the route of holistic as well as psychopharmacology, which became very helpful in the intervention of, I think in some instances, saving my life, because I became the mom that I knew I could be. I was able to be the wife that was good and unified with my husband, but it took that intervention for me. And frankly, y'all, I would love to not have to take medication. Let's be honest. It's not something that I am thrilled about, but I've accepted the fact that my body is the way that it is, that I have a genetic predisposition to anxiety and depression. And frankly, my kids, I already have one kiddo that struggles with anxiety on a clinical level. There is something about sometimes our bodies are born with these deficiencies or these inabilities to create feel-good chemicals. Now, that is not the path for everyone. I do have to tell you that. I highly recommend that if you are struggling with the mom guilt, intrusive thoughts, depression, worrisome thoughts, or stress, anxiety, please go talk to a therapist. Go talk to your doctor. Talk about different options. Not everyone needs a psychopharmacology. They don't all need medication. In fact, sometimes it's a vitamin deficiency. Other times, it's a deep-rooted thinking error that increases your stress hormone, cortisol, in your brain that actually depresses some of the feel-good chemicals that are in your body. And it takes a therapist helping you go through some of those thinking errors and those lies so that you can overcome that, so that you can create neural pathways that create feel-good chemicals. It's super cool how our bodies do that. So that can work for some people. However, there is also evidence on the other side that depression and anxiety, mood disorders, all of those can be biochemical, physiological issues in our body. I always tell, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, adjunct professor at Indiana Wesleyan, and I teach the future counselors that are out there. And we talk about how there are PET scans. This is PET, PET scans. And what's so fascinating is you actually get to see the brain activity of people that may have depression, anxiety, or mood disorders. And so in this process, you get to see that the parts of the brain that should be activated, that should be in motion while you're experiencing your world around you, are not. This again is indicative that mental health struggles and issues are physiological in some cases. And so if that's the case, again, go talk to your doctor, go talk to your therapist, listen to your body. There are other options out there, but mom guilt can be associated with some of these mental health struggles, and you can overcome that when you talk to a professional. So that leads me to our next step of what should you do if you're struggling with mom guilt, or if you're struggling with the invisible load of motherhood, parenthood, right? So here's a couple of my suggestions. First, be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. Do only what you can do in that day. Some days, y'all are going to be rocking mom life. I definitely recommend that you take some selfies. You point it out. You allow everyone to hit you up on the social media and say, yes, today is a good day. I am rocking mom life. My kids have matching socks on. They brush their teeth and they are dressed in a decent outfit. Like, yes, celebrate those moments. And then there's going to be other days where it's just a win that you brushed your teeth, right? That's the way it is. But be kind to yourself. Parent life is hard. And then you add in other roles that you have as either working inside the home or working outside the home. You're doing a lot. So give yourself grace and remind yourself that it's not always going to be bad days. You're going to have good days there too. Another thing that you can do is accept your current season. So the cool thing about this podcast is it's called Embracing Your Season. I came up with that title because I think we oftentimes don't stay in the present. Instead, we're looking to when my kids get older, when my kids are able to do this, and when I can start doing this because my kids are this age, right? We're constantly in forward motion, or we might be stuck in the past. There's some resentment or things that we haven't healed from. We need to be present today and say, thank you for where I am at today. Because keep in mind that every season has a purpose. You are in this season for a particular reason. Maybe it's to learn something. Maybe it's something to grow. But this season will not always be the case. They always say that it's going to be so fast that your kids grow up. And we hear that, but sometimes it's hard to be in the moment and to appreciate where we're at. So take a moment, embrace where you're at, appreciate the season you're in, knowing that it will be different in the future. Another thing that you can do to move out of mom guilt is ask your partner, your family, your friends for help. You can't expect them to read your mind. I mean, that's what I did for many years with my husband. I was like, I'm doing the dishes, I'm changing diapers. Like, can you not see that I need some assistance here? The passive aggressiveness apparently wasn't translating. So I did him a disservice by not allowing him to help me, because when he found out that I needed help or desired help, he wanted to come alongside me. He wanted to assist. And this isn't about him just stepping into this role because it's not his role to begin with. No, he is my partner. He is the father of my children, and he wants to help so that we can provide a harmonious environment, a healthy environment for our kiddos. But also it's because he loves me and he wants to assist me and not be in a place where it's a struggle for us. And he especially doesn't like the fact that I become passive aggressive. So it was really win-win for all of us. So here's something that you can try maybe this week. Discuss your upcoming week and where your partner can help. And don't just discuss general assistance, right? This isn't like, hey, can you get up in the middle of the night when the baby cries? Or can you take the kids to tutoring? No, it's on Thursday, I need help with this. And then on the days that you feel like your bucket isn't full enough to pour out to anybody else, that's a time where you can mention that. Be like, I am done for today. Is there any way that you can make dinner? Is there any way that you can go and pick the kids up from soccer practice? Asking your partner to assist you in tangible, specific ways can change the conversation. That helps you both unify together as well as help you out and make you feel supported and loved so that you're not struggling with it on your own. Next step, practice Sabbath. Okay, this is a word that's thrown around a lot in church, but I don't think many people know much about it. In fact, until probably a couple of years ago, I was under the understanding that Sabbath was going to church and not really doing much on a certain day. No, Sabbath is such more than that. It's an emotional place of rest where we can trust that God will handle all the details, that he loves us and our kids even more than we are aware of, and he wants to bring blessings, but we just need to be still and trust in him. Pete Scazzero, he has tons of books and information, podcasts about Sabbath. In fact, a book that I really highly recommend is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Again, that's Pete Scazzero. He has phenomenal work, but Sabbath discussions are really powerful, and I think this can really transform the way that you see how do you trust God with your day-to-day life. Another thing that you can do to overcome mom guilt is seek help from professionals. So I mentioned this a little bit briefly before. I think processing what you're experiencing, feeling heard and seen is such a powerful way to heal from some of the things that we might be experiencing and to learn to become healthy. You can talk to your doctor, find a good therapist, but advocate for yourself. Find what works best for you, your body, and your mind, and your family. Just make sure you're talking to someone about it, because you don't need to live in isolation anymore. And then finally, eliminate negative influences. This is one where you need to take that step back and say, what am I allowing to speak into my life? So whether it's social media, it's books, it's resources, neighbors, even family, okay? Take a moment and think, who am I allowing to speak into my life as a mom, as a parent, as a wife, as a friend, a sister, whatever it is, whatever role that you maintain, who are you allowing to speak into that role about who you are? And then start realizing, what are they speaking? Is it negative? Is it positive? And when you determine that some of the stuff that is being spoken over you is actually words of death, words of discouragement, words of condemnation and judgment, you need to start considering, can I reduce or even eliminate some of those interactions? might mean that you're going to have to unfollow some people on social media. It means that you're probably going to have to avoid certain topics with your family, even going as far as asking them not to speak about some of those things to you because you find it discouraging. And again, their intention most likely is to benefit you. But if you're finding that it's actually causing more harm than good, then you have every right and should speak to your needs and advocate for yourself and asking them to refrain from discussing such topics. Again, be mindful. What are you feeding yourself? What are you speaking over yourself and allowing others to speak over you as well? And then this is just a side note, mamas. Be cautious and mindful about what you are speaking over other moms. Be cautious about advice and wisdom and resources that you're sharing with moms because they unfortunately, even though your intention might be good, might hear it as criticism. We need to ask moms how they're doing. We need to walk alongside them in their life and journey with them. We need to be still and we need to actively listen to what's going on with what they're experiencing. And frankly, moms, we got to be a tribe together. You know what it's like to feel alone and isolated. You know what it's like to feel mom guilt. And so to know that you are a proponent or a contributor to that to someone else, I'm sure that breaks your heart. So be mindful. What am I speaking over them? What am I sharing with them, telling them? Sometimes you just need to ask, what do you need from me? How can I support you? And many times it's just listening. And we can do that. We can do that well, mamas. So let's try to be more of those mama tribes together to support one another. All right, so here's a summary of how we can combat mom guilt. So we can be kind to ourselves. We need to embrace our current season. We need to ask for help. We need to practice Sabbath, seek help from professionals, and eliminate negative influences. Mamas, we can do this. We can do this together in community. We can love one another and support one another. You are doing a great job. So in those moments that you start feeling that mom guilt start creeping up, practice one of these things that I mentioned. See how it helps you. See how it releases you from the burden that you feel like you're a failure as a mom. Because frankly, you're listening to this podcast right now. Either it's because you're one of my dear friends and I love you and thank you for supporting me, or it's because you want to be a better mama and we want to support you in that. That's why I love doing this podcast, to provide resources and experts that can speak to some of the things that you're struggling with or just want to learn more about. So, friends, thanks for joining me today. I hope that you have been encouraged and equipped. Make sure that you tune in to additional episodes as we continue to have amazing conversations about embracing your season.